Welcome back to Laguna Seca and the Rolex reunion here in Monterey. I'm Jonathan Green, and I'm delighted to introduce the man who is privileged enough to be called the Grand Marshal here this weekend. I've met him before. Bill Warner is his name, and I know, having read up on the press coming into the event, you're feeling fairly honored to be at the 50th, because it doesn't really get much bigger, does it?
No, it doesn't. I'm thrilled to be here. I started here as a photographer for Road and Track years ago, 30 years ago, before they even vintage, or 50 years ago. And then I started racing here a few years back, so I've seen both sides of it. So it is a great race course, a very challenging one.
So tell me, how you photographer, Road and Track, obviously you were interested. Was that how you got your foot in, and what sparked your interest?
Well, you start out like everybody in the SCCA in something small. My first race was in a Honda Civic. Then I grew into Camaros, and then later the Group 44 cars, the TR6 and TR8.
And we'll see some of those out this weekend too.
My good friend Mark Linder's in the sister car to mine,
there you go.
TR8.
Well, so what have they got you doing then as the Grand Marshal? Are they keeping you busy, or are you
marshalling? And I'm also the chief steward, so I'm working with Ray Evernham and
well, that's nice.
Henry Wilkinson and Tom Bungay and the team.
Yeah.
We look after the cars, make sure they're period correct, and that they comply with the rules of the day.
Well, but we've got every era kind of covered here. Is there a favorite? Is there a time in motor racing in America where you really suddenly saw it vault forward, or there's one of those 44 cars. But was there a time where you really kind of thought American racing had come into its own?
Well, I think I would say 1973, because at that time, there wasn't a whole lot of international racing here. In fact, 73 at Daytona was pretty weak as far as prototypes went, and that's when Peter Gregg, who we're honoring with this class today, and Hurley Haywood won the 24 Hours at Daytona. And then IMSA started morphing into more cars like the 934, 935 that you just saw there. So I would say 73 was a point where I saw it taken off.
Yeah, and also when you think about the 70s in America, it became the center of the planet in many ways for racing drivers, or good ones anyway, because you had Can-Am, you had Trans Am, you had Formula 5000, and so it was, in terms of earning money and sponsorship and so on, it was pretty much the center of the globe, wasn't it?
Well, it was, and a lot of the Brits came over then. David Hobbs, Brian Redmond.
Yep.
Redmond said, when they went to a Road Atlanta with the 5000 car, first prize was 15 grand, and they were only spending about 10 to get there. Nowadays you spend 10 you don't get anything.
I know. I was reading up about Mario Andretti turning down a full-time drive with Ferrari early on in his career because he knew he could earn more money in the States.
Oh yeah.
That changed later. So the Peter Gregg Trophy race 1, and we really do have a fantastic field of almost 30 cars out here. And Bill, shout if there's something that you see that you want to talk about. I'll take you through some of them that we see. We're looking at the
I took a ride in that black 00 935 with Danny Angaias years ago. They'd mounted a second seat in it as kind of an incentive ride for the mechanics, and I knew the chief. And I just raced the Camaro at Daytona, so they strapped me in, and I took a ride. Danny said, "How fast do you want to go?" I said, "Go as fast as you do." And
it's always a mistake to say
that. Oh,
it
was. When he slammed on the brakes coming into turn 1, I folded in half. I didn't have a harness on. I just had a lap belt.
Well, that's Jim Norman out there in that 1980 Porsche 935 K3.
Ransom Webster in the 935. He's a longtime supporter here. The Decon Monzas. Al Holbert won the championship in those. Terrific cars. BMW M1. That was a great car. It was just a terrific time for racing because you had all the manufacturers involved.
Yeah, exactly. So up the hill they go then. And we're still under caution, or at least under pace car, put it that way. And getting ready to fire it off again. And yeah, just looking, sorry, I lost my group. There we are.
Yeah.
So yeah, Patrick Byrne out there, that's his second run. He's in the Corvette from 1977. Carlos DeQuesta. Famous name too. Ken Exman out there as well. You mentioned Ransom, yeah.
Ken Exman's really fast.
Oh yeah.
Here.
Yeah, well, he's long time historic racer here in the US of A. There's that big BMW, I love that. Zach Brown also out in that 320i Turbo 78 BMW, talking of which, we've got several.
You know, when you look at it this weekend, we have some great executives racing.
I know.
Here, like Jim Farley, president of Ford, Zach Brown, heads up McLaren. I mean,
I know, it's
these
nuts,
are some heavy hitters.
Yeah, and you know, Jim Farley was saying that he's become, I mean, you know, he's sort of spotted at pretty much most of the historic races, and he says he gets a lot of business done actually because there's a lot of wheelers and dealers that are, you know, part of what he's doing, or either subsidiaries of Ford, or you know, in the new projects with Mustang that he's involved with, and of course the future in Formula One with Red Bull. So you never know.
Well, here we go. Let's see if we can get them all around 11 before they give them the green.
Here we go then. Group 8 roars into action here for the Peter Gregg Trophy. What was your knowledge of Peter's career, Peter Gregg? I know Simon, but I never knew, obviously, Peter.
Well, Peter was an intelligence officer in the Navy in Jacksonville. And at the time, Brundage Motors was a Volkswagen distributor, and it was owned by, whoa, look at that,
three wide. Doesn't get any better than that.
That's a little argy-bargy, as our friend David Hobbs would say.
A bit of a schmozzle in the middle there.
Yeah. It doesn't
but go ahead.
Stop. No, Mr. Brundage took on the Porsche franchise, and they were trying to think of a name for Brundage Motors or Brundage Porsche. And someone in the meeting came up with the fact that Brumos was their telex code. So that's how the Brumos name
came about.
Yeah. And it's funny because people would call up saying, you know, I served in Vietnam with Mr. Brumos. I'd like to talk to him about his insurance, you know. But that's how Brumos came about. Well, Peter Gregg was into racing. He went to the Piero Taruffi school and learned how to race. And his first race was in a Corvette. And he had a chance to buy Brumos Porsche, which he did, and then he became very closely associated with Porsche.
Yeah, and of course that, I mean, in America, Brumos Porsche, that name, it just, you know, it screams Daytona, it screams Sebring. It is, it's so synonymous, and not just Florida, but everywhere. Here we go. So we've got nice little packages of racing here. Little group of 4 coming through. 10 and the final corner here at Laguna Seca. You're listening to the Grand Marshal for the weekend. Bill Warner giving us some insights to his history of this fantastic era. As we take a look at that number 2 BMW flying through. That's Zach Brown, as we mentioned, in that 78.
Back in those days, that BMW was really a nickel rocket. You know, it would qualify well, but it was competing against the Porsche 9 Carreras and 934s, 935s. It just didn't last long. David Hobbs was one of the drivers in that. I remember he qualified on the pole of Atlanta. That was probably one of the best demonstrations of the car at that time.
Yeah, no question about it. BMW really made a name for themselves. We talk about Brumos Porsche. I mean, BMW had its era of, like you say, Hobbs, Redmond, those guys at Daytona, really taking that CSL car and its mark, the BMW mark, to big heights in the USA. John Anderson was the man we were looking at in that red, white, and blue 1969 Corvette. Beautifully prepared and similar to what I've seen in SVRA. I think I've seen it race in SVRA too, as well as here at Monterey.
There's Mark Leonard in the TR8. Great car, but just not enough horsepower. You know, it's about, I think we were getting somewhere around 375 horsepower. You're talking about other cars out there punching 500, 600 horsepower.
So but you were involved with that?
I had the sister car.
Gotcha.
That was the Bob Tullia's car. I had the Bill Adam car.
How was it?
It was great. It's like driving a go-kart. You know, the wheelbase and the tread was about the same as a square car.
Wow.
But it had a little Rover V8.
I bet that got some decent horsepower, though.
And it had the Kinsler fuel injection, and it was a very nimble car. The only weak point was the gearbox.
Would it break or just not work after a while?
Yeah, I wasn't built for that kind of horsepower. eventually we put a Warner T10 in it.
Just looking at car 4 that just went through shot briefly there. That's Alex Welch in the RSR from 74. Look at this little battle. Nice. Three-way battle.
Patrick Burns' Corvette is really strong.
Yeah.
There's Ransom Webster and Ken Epsom going at it. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you can tell me, but I've not done too many laps around Laguna in too many cars, but one thing I do notice is how much more banked some of the corners are, that you don't realize that it really does have the camber to it. And
no, the one that fools you the most is turn 5.
Okay.
It's got a lot of slope in it. It's got a lot of bank in it, and you can really get a car to load up and go through there much faster than you think you can.
Yeah. Because when you see it on TV, it looks flat.
No, it's not.
It looks flat in terms of not flat out, flat surface, but it's actually cambered, isn't it? Coming up there now.
When I first came here, I didn't even know that corner was there. I went on the internet and did a lap on the internet. And wow, there's another turn I didn't know about.
There you go.
These guys are having a really good
Aren't
race.
they?
Yeah.
This is great stuff.
Ken Epsom, Ransom Webster.
Yep. And yeah, is that the case?
Is that Carlos de Quesada?
I think it is in the 94.
Yeah, de Quesada. They're having a good time.
Certainly putting on a
you
show.
can see how much horsepower that
Epsom
has with that Decon Monza.
Well, Timothy Pappas out front has checked out. He's got a good 4-second lead over Patrick Byrne in the 0 car. That's the 935 from 1980.
Oh,
squeeze it, get it. Oh, nice move.
Yeah.
Yeah, that corner's cambered too, more so than it looks.
That one's got a lot of load to it too.
Yep. Yeah. This one, not so much.
No, that was a first gear corner for me.
That's a tricky corner.
That's the Kemp Mustang back there, the white. Charlie Kemp had that car built in IMSA. Had a lot of NASCAR features to it. Ooh,
side-by-side action, and he got up the inside. Yeah, nicely done.
That's Chris Liebenberg driving that. Good driver. Drives for Rossmeyer and Three Dog Garage.
Yeah, 75, that car. Just ahead of Rick Jeffrey in the Monza Decon from 1976. Distinctive look, that Decon, isn't it?
You got a favorite?
Not so much in this group. I was tell you what, I was eyeing that Bentley up this morning that's in the exhibition, and I was telling jokingly that somebody that used to be my table mat at home. We used to have our dining room table that all had classic motor racing cars on them, and mine was the Bentley. So I'm glad to actually see it in the real thing.
Burns really pulled out, 5.4 second lead.
Yeah, big time. Now, what have we got here? The 155 of Taylor. Chet Taylor in the 911 SRSR from 1974.
You know, the first time I came here, I didn't know how to take the corkscrew. So I asked Bruce Canepa, what do you look for? He says, just aim towards the oak tree.
That's right.
So I'm going up the hill. I don't see an oak tree. I locked all 4 wheels up. This was in the TR6. Came smoking down the hill. The picture was on the internet before I got back to the pits. So I went to Canepa and said, where's the oak tree? He says,
well, you got to come over. Yes, exactly. You got to get over the lip before you start looking for the oak tree.
Once I figured that out, it was all right.
Yeah. Well, we got a cameraman, my good friend Lake, is right there by the oak tree. And I said, I'll look out for anybody coming your way. So we had a bit of a laugh about that because he always has that position to do his filming. So a heck of a position to be in because it's a big drop. There's that Corvette I was talking about from 1969. Can't miss that, can you?
They really made some nice improvements to the track. The resurfacing, the new crossover bridge, it's really great. It's a world-class event.
Yeah, no question about it. Anderson currently running in the top 10 in this 37 car. And yeah, I tell you what, that would draw a crowd anywhere around the world if you took it racing. It exudes American racing, that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And of course, in previous years here in Monterey, we've celebrated the likes of Corvette and particular marques, whether it be MG or Porsche and so on. And this year, obviously, the groups are labeled by drivers. So the Peter Gregg Trophy. And I think it's quite nice, actually, to mix it up a little bit for the 50th.
Well, you know, Peter Gregg, although he was always famous for Porsche, one year he had an opportunity to buy a BMW franchise, and part of the deal is he went to BMW, which was a big shock at that time. And Hurley stayed driving Porsches, and Peter went to BMW. BMW had a big program that year with David Hobbs, Benny Parsons, Brian Redmond, Peter Gregg. It was a big effort.
Oh, yeah. And, of course, Peter and then Simon went on to do Trans Am as well.
Oh, yeah.
Big player in that. Well, we've got perfect weather here for the weekend. Have you been here for the previous? Because obviously this event starts, what, a week ago or even longer in terms of the prep here. But the whole Monterey 2 weeks is one hell of an event now.
Well, it's almost sensory overload with, with the auctions and the shows, and everybody's putting on a show. You just got to pick and choose.
Yeah, you couldn't do it all, could you? Look at Steve Walker in that 76 BMW CSL. Number 1, Castrol colors.
You know, it's funny. What we would think is turn 1 is really turn 2 at the bottom of the hill. I'm interested in seeing all the different lines that go through there. I don't think there's one line that is accepted as being correct.
Well, that car you just saw from Steve Walker there, that was the 1976 European Touring Car Champion, and then runner-up in 77. So another storied car as we take a look at the 55. Coming through shot, that's Chandler Briscoe in a 73 BMW.
At the 3-liter CSL, they made one turbocharged car that was doing over 800 horsepower back in those days.
That must have rattled it to death.
Yeah. But of course, it's pushing a brick.
Yeah. I don't think Stuttgart will be too impressed with that, but now they look so cool. Back in the day, they were just a bit boxy, but now they just reach
Batmobile.
Cool. Yeah, exactly.
You know, that turn after the corkscrew is an interesting one. When you see lines go through there, people generally don't go to the far outside to set up because you got a hard right coming up, so you got to get over left. So you kind of give up something there coming down.
Yeah, and the guys that really know Laguna can take corners like that because the obvious line can be changed, because coming down that hill there is an outside line, but you just got to get across early to get back, of course, because you're going to the right-hander next. Talk to Wayne Rainey about that, because of course the corner's named after him. I said, why did they name the corner after you then? He said, oh, well, I have to go. I said, what do you have? I said, what kind of obligation do you have? And he said, I have to sweep it every morning. Wayne Rainey, of course, 3-time MotoGP champion, lives here in the Monterey Hills. And running Moto America.
I had an M1 street car one time. It was nice, but you know, they didn't have a whole lot of horsepower. 277. Good handling car, though.
That's surprising. You'd think they'd have more with the size of the car. Yeah, that's the 1981 M1. IMSA Group 4. Travis Okulski at the wheel. And that was the spare car for the 81 season in IMSA. Well, we're getting a good festival of BMW coverage, that's for sure, in this one. And I'm talking to our Grand Marshal, Bill Warner. And are there any events you haven't been to yet that you're like, oh, I really want to be there before I'm done with all this?
Well, let me think about that for a minute.
Okay.
I love Le Mans.
Yeah.
Been there a number of times. Went to Monaco once. That's kind of a more of a
You'd enjoy
party.
I tell you what you would enjoy is the Monaco Historic.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys obviously take part in that.
Yeah.
But it's a fascinating event. So Pappas has led the whole way. We haven't seen much of him, but he's put on a great show. And here is your leader, Timothy Pappas, in the Zero car. You said, is this the one you went in? Oh,
yeah,
no, it was a W0.
They won Daytona with Hurley and Danny Angaias and Ted Field.
1980.
It was called the Interscope 935. And I think the IRS came in and said, what's an Interscope? And they had to find a product that they could market
as an Interscope.
As an Interscope.
There you go. Neat looking, and the design with the color scheme makes it look almost thinner than it really is.
You know, black cars, from a photographer's standpoint, do not photograph
well.
No.
I can imagine. On gray asphalt, no. You really want a red or a white.
Another thing about Peter Gregg, you know, he had his cars, the first cars were orange. Then he was very patriotic, so he liked red, white, and blue. And he got a guy named Dave Kent who designed the paint schemes for Peter Brock on the Datsun to design a paint scheme for Brumos. But that's where the red and white sweeps came from. But the hood was painted red and white, and it was instantly recognizable in a rearview mirror. And it was a psychological thing.
Yeah, that's a clever idea. Yep, you know exactly what's coming.
Actually, the first time the Brumos color scheme came out was out here on the West Coast. It may have been Riverside first, then Laguna, with Hurley Haywood in the 917-10. Now see, look at that line. See how it's different through turn 2 than everybody does it
differently, yeah. And it is one of those corners that you can do that. I have seen overtakes on the outside, or
if you go wide and set up, there's always someone who will deep dive you on the inside.
Right.
So you kind of protect your position by being in the middle.
Yeah, and you can also do a kind of a fakie where you look as though you're going to the inside, force the guy to take that inside line, which slows him down, and then sweep around the outside and hopefully have the position for the next corner on the inside.
Well, I was never good enough to do that.
Well, and I talk a good game. I've just watched a lot of this.
I need to go back and try that,
Yeah. Well, here's that corner you were talking about earlier. Turn left-hander up the hill. That's a tough corner too, this one, because you can easily get locked out on the outside of that if you don't take if you go too fast into it.
Up the hill, the fast left up the hill, it's got a good bank to it, you know, and you can really lay on it.
Yep.
But you don't want to look at what's on the other side of the guardrail.
No, you do not.
It drops off a lot.
A heck of a lot.
Oh, what's his lead now? My golly, 13 seconds.
Killing it.
Killing it. Yeah.
Quick glimpse there of car number 40.
No substitute for cubic inches.
No, that's true. Now, where is my car?
Yep, white flag lap.
Okay, we're on that white flag lap. One more to go. That's Patrick Byrne, finally we get to see him in the 40.
Now he's got a good wide line there, but then no one's challenging him, so he can take a wider line and get a better exit. Now if someone was close on you, you'd want to squeeze it a little bit more.
So Pappas and Byrne. Pappas out front, Byrne in second, but the gap is quite huge at this point. And this is going to be a cakewalk for the zero car of Pappas in the 1980 Porsche 935. Monterey Motorsports reunion comes to a close of its first running of Group 8. Our Peter Gregg Trophy grid. Bill Warner helping me through it and giving some great insight. Just a weekend I'm sure you'll remember for a long time, right?
Oh yeah, this is a wonderful weekend, and I feel so honored to be a part of it as the Grand Marshal. I got that job because I missed the Zoom meeting.
Ah, good.
Yeah.
So that was your penance, was it?
Yeah, it was.
Fair enough. Here we go then. Out comes the checkered flag, and Pappas Timothy takes the win and does it in style. Well, he absolutely rolled that one. And yeah, some really nice laps. 129 he got into, just dipping under the 130 mark. And doesn't get much better than that. Across the line in second place, Patrick Byrne, not to be surprised by that. Quite some distance. We only saw a glimpse of him late in the race, but he was running in second for most of it. And Ransom Webster taking third place. Jim Norman in fourth, and Rick Jeffrey in fifth. Chet Taylor sixth. John Anderson seventh in the car we were talking about, and Travis Olkowski in eighth. And we're still waiting for come over. Zach Brown looks as though he will finish in the top 10. But Bill, thank you so much for coming up here.
Jonathan, it's been a pleasure.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
for having me.
Absolutely. Feel free to come in as your weekend continues. Maybe come in at the end of Sunday and tell us how your weekend went.
Well, I think I'll see you sometime 2 o'clock tomorrow.
All right, perfect. I'll put a date in. There you go. I'll write it down. Let's head down to Kev Harris down in the paddock.